Thank you for joining the Missing Half podcast, where we're discovering what's missing in manufacturing and B2B marketing. Today, we're continuing our Owners and Founders series, and I have a very special guest. Dave Kohl, thank you for joining us today.
Sure. You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thank you for hosting us here today in this building. And your people have been just marvelous and very warm and hospitable to us.
Good. Thank you.
Dave, if it's okay, I would like to go back. You told me a story. You're a serial entrepreneur, right? I'm sorry. We both have the same Naihudi disease. Take me back to the run in the mailbox, if you would. If you remember the story, you told me about going for the run and getting that check in the mailbox.
Oh, yeah. I left corporate America. I had a pretty good paying job and went back to a company I purchased had 4 employees. It was May, and I didn't have enough money to cover payroll. And they didn't have a line of credit. I didn't even know what a line of credit was at that time. So I kind of got up from the desk. I put a call into Jack Dewar, who was the headhunter, and then went for a run. And came home. He called me back, said he had a bunch of jobs for me if I wanted them. These were VPs of sales and marketing type positions. And went into work in the morning, and in the mail came a $4,000 check, and it covered payroll. And here we are, 25 years later.
Isn't it amazing, though, that most entrepreneurs' stories have that moment?
Yeah.
Have that, white knuckle.
It was over. Yeah, it was
right.
done. I did payroll then too. Like I ran QuickBooks, I did the payroll.
Sure.
I knew the numbers, and I'm like, we don't have enough. And called Jack back and said, hey, I think I'm going to keep trying this. And
sure.
Yeah.
What is it about, and this is really just about entrepreneurship and about, starting and founding. Mm-hmm. What is it that kept you going at that moment? Like,
you want to win. It's a desire to win. It's sort of like, I don't know how to explain it. It's not even the money necessarily. It's just the adventure. Mm-hmm. And I like to win. And I think over the years, I surrounded myself with people that were better than me. It's kind of like playing hockey as a kid. You got a winger or center that's better than you. You get him the puck, right? And I learned that a long time ago. And my dad told me one time that you needed to know everything everybody did in business. And I said, if I do that, I'll never grow. I can't do it. And over the years, every people I hired were better than me at the job I did. And I think that's how we were successful.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So we had that moment, that run, that call to the headhunter, that check. And then 20 years later, that business, you exit.
Yep.
Maybe talk about that journey with CWM and how that all played out.
Well, it's Mike Winterhalter, my mergers and acquisition attorney and friend and hunting buddy. Ken Durrett, my CFO, Phil Kontakis, my investment advisor, said some pretty sophisticated financial and legal people said it's time to take some money off the table. We had Armstrong Nutrition Management, 130 employees, CWM, 100 employees. I was a co-founder in 120 Water Audit that had a few hundred employees. We had some real estate because, as you know, banks like bricks and mortar.
Yep.
So over the years, we did as they required or requested. It was just time to, sort of like a farmer, maybe time to cash out some of the assets and the land to get a little cash in the bank. So that was probably the short, quick answer to how we did that.
But an amazing journey from 4 employees, you running QuickBooks, that white knuckle moment to that first exit.
Yep.
Right, with CWM.
Yes, that was September of 22, I believe.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Whenever you think about the other ventures you've been involved with and are still, in some of them you still have interest in.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about Armstrong and then 120, if you would.
Well, Armstrong, I never thought anybody ever want to buy it. Like it's a sort of a niche business. The neat thing, it was CMS, demanded or CMS regulated. So you had to comply with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services as a hospital, nursing home, healthcare provider. So we did have a niche. But when one of the companies looked at CWM, we sent the QuickBook. Actually, it was It was a higher end version of QuickBooks. I can't think of the name. I can't remember now. Anyhow, Empower or something like that.
Sure.
They got back to us and said, "Hey, what's this Armstrong Nutrition dietary company you have?" And we told them, and they said we'd be interested in buying that. And so the following March of 23, we sold to Dining RD, owned by Health Technologies Incorporated, Evolution Capital. We gave them a number, and they agreed, and that happened pretty quick.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So that worked. And then the following December, 120 Water Auto was approached by Edison Partners. I was a 20% owner of that company, and we sold 56% or 61% of that company. So three PE exits in about 18 months.
So you kind of got into this new habit, Dave, right? And then you kept going back.
It rolled. It evolved. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you think about those three companies, my understanding is they are two are somewhat similar, but 120 Water is very, very different in that 120 Water was really more of a marketing and demand acquisition company, whereas CWM and Armstrong are more in the compliance and
Service business, regulatory driven. Yeah, it's interesting. They kind of work in reverse, but they both were. CWM was, Department of Environmental Protection mandated in PA and EPA in Ohio, and then every state has it. It's all regulatory driven, NPDES permits, drinking water calendars, monitoring calendars. The same with the dietary. It was driven by CMS. You had to comply. So it was interesting. They sound a lot different, but they had a lot of commonalities.
Sure.
120 is a SaaS or software as a solution play to help water authorities solve their lead and copper issues. So, yeah.
When you think about those three companies, and so the Missing Out podcast is about marketing and growth. Do you see the different role that marketing may have played in those businesses, and to what degree? Like it feels to me like CWM you had a very defined market. Mm-hmm. You have a very mature market. There's not a lot of new players coming in and out.
No, the average operator is my age.
Yeah. So again, and these are folks who are in those positions for many, many years.
Yes.
So we have that at CWM. When we think about Armstrong, there probably weren't a lot of new market entrants, probably a pretty defined mature market. Mm-hmm. And then they're mandated to deal with this situation in your managed service provider.
They had to have us.
Yeah. 120 Water, though, that was a little different, where you had to have a much more aggressive marketing team to go out and activate kind of a more...
Well, your audience is older.
Yes.
To get them to use software was more difficult. They sold a new solution. I do think that teaching old dogs new tricks is tough. A lot of these guys that use that software, that's a big undertaking.
Sure.
And it worked. I think that company has 14% of the national market.
Oh, wow.
If they were Procter & Gamble, they'd be jumping up in the air and clicking their heels together. Right? Yeah, I think there's 70,000 roughly water systems in the U.S., and I think they have 9,000 of them.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So when you think about, there was a more of an educational, a marketing component to 120 Water because it was truly new.
Absolutely. They were very strong at sales and marketing. Honestly, a company like yours would have been great to have as we were growing, because you get a person that knows marketing, but they know one facet of it, and they're usually junior. Mm-hmm. We'd hire somebody out of college. It's just such a diverse skill set that you need a company to support that. I'm not saying you don't have a marketing person. You need somebody as a focal point or a center for handling that. But a lot of those are things that companies like yours would, it's invaluable.
When you think about and not to get into the specific numbers, but when you think about the differential in the exit multiples, did you see where marketing had or could have had a better impact on some of the exits?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think they'd value it more as a purchaser or a buyer. I think you'd have more rapid growth. You'd be bigger. And it also shows some sophistication. If they look at you and they see some audited financials, that builds sophistication. They see some organizational structure, sophistication. marketing. We were probably weak in those areas. Had we had a stronger, we might have valued more. I to your point, probably.
Well, one of the things I think that when we look at the PE and the M&A space is we have a lot of folks who work at those firms and are putting together those deals, and they're very skilled and very talented at the financial construction of deals. They know how to pull levers. They know how to manage expense. In some ways, they know how to leverage operational efficiencies.
They're all sharp. Like, I don't think I met one that wasn't pretty on point.
Very good at what
Very
they do.
smart. Yep.
One of the things I found through this podcast and talking to folks in the M&A community is as soon as you move out of that world and you move into the marketing and organic growth world, it is almost like a foreign language.
Well, they understand the need for it, but they don't know how it works.
Correct.
Right. And they're done, really. They've sort of they're like a waitress. They got their tip and they move on. Right. So now you're standing there going, what do we do next?
Yes.
And I think a company like yours for Materi, Donning RD, 120 not as much, because a lot of those folks, that's where they came out of. For sure. They had that skill set just innately. But that's an unusual situation. Most companies don't have that. And again, they have a junior marketing person that knows one facet of marketing when there's maybe a dozen facets to marketing.
Well, and one of the theories that we're bringing to market through one of our companies, one of our subsidiaries at 50 Marketing, is that earnings, EBITDA, and exit multiples can be impacted immediately in deal construction and in deal execution in private equity and mergers and acquisitions. And I think what we've seen over our history in some of the clients we've had, and then certainly just in talking to folks in the market, that a lot of the folks who are really sharp put together these amazing deals. And then as soon as they have to turn on that organic growth lever, man, they are just struggling, right? They're in trouble.
So, well, Schneider Downs did our deals, and they were spot on. Good group. Very smart, efficient, managed the process. We had 43 companies request, I think it was called a SIM, curriculum or circular for information memorandum or something like that. 17 companies made offers. We've met with 5 on CWM. As I mentioned, one of those companies came back and paid the price we asked for nutrition, no questions asked. So these guys were great. But I think to your point, once you're through that process, whoever buys that company, what do they do next? What's their next move? I think there's a need for a marketing firm that can help them with all facets of marketing. Yeah.
Dave, when you think back through, so not only have you exited some businesses, but you've also, in some of the businesses, stayed on for a period of time to help support them in management. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges that these companies face, like post?
Right. You don't know what a lot of these are called roll-ups, right? So you have multiple sites that do varying things. It's all in the same sector or industry, but they all do it differently. And one of the biggest challenges is to market that. How do you're not necessarily selling a Whopper in all states. You have a Whopper in PA, you have a Big Mac in Illinois, you have Kentucky Fried Chicken in Michigan. You don't have the same thing. So the challenge is to get all that under one umbrella and figure out how to present that to the marketplace. So I think that's a big challenge, is figuring out what every site does and incorporating that into a marketing plan.
I think that's especially an issue in the mid-market. If you're looking at really, really large companies that are very, very similar, I think in some ways M&A is easier and roll-ups are easier because they're very similar in what they do.
Right.
But when we think about the middle market and you think about companies that do 10, 20, $30 million, nice EBITDA, like they're performing well, but they are unique.
Right.
And unique not only regionally, service offerings, still within the same vertical, but I think that becomes a challenge to kind of rectify all that and pull it together.
Right.
What do you see as far as culture? Like, one of the things I think you had to have built at CWM and at Armstrong was an amazing culture.
Yeah, I think we had a strong culture. We had a really solid HR person that had moved home to take care of her mother.
Okay.
And I always forget if she worked for Bank of America or J.P. Morgan, but one or the other. And she was a high-end executive. So she helped us with our culture and actually cared. So you had a sense of camaraderie. I think I helped with that. We cared about employees. We showed it, and people would. The guys are out on the job site and they're supposed to go home at 3, but they'd be done by 6 if they stayed. They'd stay till 6 and get the job done. And
Sure.
you can't. That's invaluable. It just drives profit margin, EBITDA, all the things that you need as a company, because the individuals that make 1,000 decisions that you can't be a part of are making good ones, or ones that you would make, and that's a real strong cultural advantage.
How do you see these roll-ups struggling with culture? I mean, it's
right. It's because every site's a little different.
Sure.
Right. The overall company doesn't have its own brand yet. That's where marketing would help. I think to your point, those are issues that have to be solved as you do roll-ups. And that's something that is still not solved or repaired, I'd say, in a lot of these companies.
One of the things we've seen is companies can use a mission and vision and value and a brand promise to really rally everyone around. Mm-hmm. So whether it's they're trying to recruit, they're trying to communicate to their current staff, they're trying to communicate to their current customers, potential customers, if there's a consolidated brand, a consolidated identity. And we've been seeing more movement in the marketing space, because certainly that's outward communication. You need to have videos, you need to have social media, all those touch points.
Well, it's evolving, right?
Yes.
Every day, week, month, it evolves. Yes.
The old, I remember in business school, they talked about, I'm going to get the letters wrong, MBWA, management by walking around. Mm-hmm. And that was effective whenever you had one plant and you went to that plant every day.
Right.
Today, that is done through social media. Right. That's done through those touch points that go out consistently, or a video that's played on the plant floor,
right,
in the break room, those type of things.
The workplace has changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at culture, that's another issue. What are any of the other challenges that you've identified that you see in the M&A space, the PE space, that you think maybe should be addressed?
Well, I've noticed the sales and marketing components they struggle with. I think operations is implied. It seems they bought the company because that works pretty decent. The challenge is, how do you sell and market that new entity?
Sure.
I think that's a big thing. There's common things like economies of scale, purchasing, consolidation. Those are things that I think PEs and accountants and financial people know how to do. The things that they don't understand is the call it soft touch stuff, the HR, the sales, the marketing things that really augment the business.
Whenever you built CWM and Armstrong, how much did you know the numbers?
Oh, infinitely.
Right.
Yeah. Ken Durrett came to us in 2017, and my biggest take-home message from him was gross margin. We weren't charging enough. And I think that's a common mistake for startup businesses and smaller businesses. You really need to, everybody's reluctant to raise price or change price. We had a 5% price increase every year in, year out.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think Pennsylvania fishing licenses went from $22 to $40 one year. People were jumping off bridges, going nuts. Had they raised it 5% a year, they'd have been at $60.
Sure.
And that's what we did. And 5% really, it kept you at or above inflation, except for a few years ago we were below. But
sure,
by and large, over 25 years, and our costs go up, right? Chemicals go up, labor goes up, insurance goes up. That'd be my biggest piece of advice would be, it's okay to charge a fair price.
Whenever you were in the numbers, mm-hmm, how much time did you spend educating your team on the numbers so that whenever they were making those thousands of decisions a day that you couldn't be involved with?
Their whole compensation structure was based on those numbers.
Great.
Besides their base pay, but they knew the numbers as well as I did. They knew gross margins. They were incented on gross margin, incented on sales, because even if your operations, your work goes up, you're hiring more people, you get busier. So we had a 50-50 bonus for most of the, the managers and above. They would get a bonus on gross margin and a bonus on growth.
Excellent.
They didn't necessarily do the growth, but they did more work for the growth.
And they supported the growth.
Yes. The average person, if they got an additional certification, they did something above and beyond, then they'd get $1 or $2 an hour more. Then there was merit, or not merit, those are merit increases. Then there'd be just annual cost of living adjustments.
That's great. I think what we've seen in talking to owners and founders, a couple of things, especially those who have grown really, really well and exited, they've known the numbers. Mm-hmm. They built teams, they built a culture, they incented their employees and made sure that, they had a cohesive unit.
Yeah, there was no secrets. They knew the gross revenue of the company. They knew what their business unit did. They know what we did overall. They know the profit. They'd be involved in the decisions on what we purchased, what was the next acquisition, what were we going to buy, what did we need. That they were very involved.
A message maybe for some of our younger listeners. We have some students, some who are just getting out of college, that type of thing. One of the things I think that is happening with our youth today is they go on the internet, they see social media, these influencers, and some of these people who have caught lightning in a bottle. They're 24 years old and they're on the yacht and drive the Lambo and live in Miami.
Listening to Steely Dan.
Yeah, doing right.
Right.
And that's most likely not going to happen for
top 1%ers or 0.1%,
right?
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
Maybe talk about how you built this over a long period of time, and you were in the literal mud.
Oh yeah, like I worked for Abbott Laboratories when I was a young man, and I was a number one sales rep in the company, number one in the region for multiple years. Went to President's Club. Everybody wanted to know what I did. I just got up early in the morning. I'd see my customers at 7. I'd take them to breakfast. They never saw a sales rep before 9 or 10, right?
Sure.
They need a kit. I could fix equipment. I'd get on the phone, call. After a while, I was like the tech. There's no other way. You roll up your sleeves and you go work, and they recognize that. And I think that carried over into CWM and Armstrong. I did the work. We'd be at work at 6 or 6:30. I'd work till 5. Go grab the soccer next. Go coach soccer. Get up the next day and do it again.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And whenever, when we see these success stories online, they're fast forward, mm-hmm. right? Like,
they show all the heavy lifting.
Correct. And even when you started CWM in the early years, you were doing the work.
Oh yeah, I did the micro. I did testing. Ran the AA. Some Ryan did it mostly, but I did everything. Matter of fact, they didn't have ICP back then, which that was a bone of contention with the DEP. I said, how can I be certified in something that didn't exist when I went through school and learned? But yeah, I did all that stuff. I hung off a stairwell in Homer City, getting stack samples. I was down in manholes. I cleaned out digesters. I would be out getting stream samples. I probably was far from the best at it, but I did it. So I know what people do. I know how hard water is to work with in November to about March. Cold, frozen, takes you hours to get stuff working. So I get that part of it, and I know how hard they work.
I remember a Christmas Eve, I was helping my father, my uncle, and my cousin. We were managing a water treatment facility for AMD.
Okay.
And the pump stopped.
RMP?
Florence. Okay. And the clarifier stopped spinning. And there was ice everywhere, and it was so cold.
Yeah.
And we worked on that thing forever. But
somebody had to do it. Right.
It's what needed done. And so you got to get dirty. I think for some of the students who might be listening or early in their careers, it's okay to take the job, to get the job, to get the job. You're not going to be the president.
Start somewhere.
Yes.
Just get started.
And work hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's a message that is not prevalent today,
right,
in the market. Today's episode of the Missing Half podcast is brought to you by 50 Marketing, a full-service agency built for B2B and manufacturing companies. Our team provides tailored strategies and services, from branding and websites to content, social media, and video, to help you grow with clarity and purpose. Visit 50marketing.com to schedule a free consultation. So Dave, today, you have exited a number of businesses. You have another business you started, Rimer Hill. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's sort of it's an LLC. It's kind of a family office. Okay. But we use that company to we bought the ranch in Colorado with that. We have some properties we've developed. It's how we manage a lot of the investments. Ken is the CFO. He handles a lot of that stuff. I'm on a couple boards.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've become somewhat of investors.
Great.
Yeah. I don't know. We operate a little bit of a real estate company, which I mentioned, the bricks and mortar.
Sure.
We probably have 50,000 square feet under roof that we rent out commercially.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you seen that market soften with COVID? And
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
We used to have about 400,000 feet of real estate.
Rentals. Yeah.
And that we exited that portfolio largely over the past 15 years.
Right.
And we are not bullish on that.
Well, I built this building we're in, hoping
Yes.
to lease or sell it, and it has not moved yet, but we're getting some interest. But I'm sure it would be nice to lease or sell this building.
Sure.
Yeah.
When I think niche real estate still works, but broad portfolios, you really have to have your finger on the pulse and understand that movement, because there's a lot of movement. The other thing is if you don't have to refinance now, any of those properties, you're in probably
7% mortgage rates or 6.5%. Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, it was a lot.
We still have 2.75s, right? 3%. Yeah.
You can sit on those for a long time,
Right.
Because the inflation will wipe on.
To make more money in the market.
Yes.
Right.
So, Dave, when you think about next steps, you're running Rimer Hill, you're actively looking at other investments. What do you see as the next several years in your career?
I don't know yet. I think there's a business opportunity out there that we'll find, whether it's SaaS, whether it's operations of some sort. We'll probably do something with Rimer Hill. Sure. Down the road. We set that up for a reason. Some of these investments will start to pay out.
Sure.
We have some money in Jacksonville, Florida, at a continuing, not a retirement community, but it has different settings for people over 55. Colorado Springs, they're renovating an apartment building. We'll put some money in that. So we diversify a little bit.
Sure.
We've got some money in some startups. A company called Catalyst does point of sale software for restaurants. Fontist Blue is a software that I learned about through some of my contacts at Pittsburgh Water, Ron Schaefer, Sammy Stitt at Westmoreland. It does automated. It takes something that was very tedious for us to do, optimizing chemical addition. So Pittsburgh Water saved $1 million in chemicals in 1 year using this software.
Wow.
Yeah, because you mix up your chemicals and you're kind of you lick your thumb and that ought to do. Well, you're overdosing or underdosing, usually overdosing.
Sure.
And that's just I think for an operator, it just takes a lot of that time, because as an operator, you got a million things to do, right? The last thing you want to do is sit down and do a calculation.
Sure.
There's a thing called jar testing. This software has AI, which does the jar test for you. I think I've done a jar test once in my career. I've been licensed for 17 years. You're supposed to do it all the time. No one does it.
Sure.
Maybe an engineer does it when they set your plan up,
Mm-hmm.
but it optimizes your filters, your clarifier that froze.
Sure.
It optimizes the filtration and the flock that you need to make it work. No one does it. Now all you do is you plug in your test parameters and it does it for you.
Amazing.
To me, it's a no-brainer. That thing's going to go like hotcakes.
No, that's awesome.
So those are some of the things that we're doing. But yeah, we're looking for the next adventure.
That's great.
Yeah.
Dave, if you had some parting comments or thoughts that you were going to give maybe a young entrepreneur, what would those be?
Well, I think you have to chase your passion. If it's a job, it's no fun, right? If it's a career, if it's something you enjoy doing, You'll do it with all your heart and soul, and that'd be my biggest first piece of advice.
Yeah, because if you're not going to enjoy that,
Why do it? You got to do it. It's the biggest. I don't care what you do in life. It's your biggest chunk of your day.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to spend way more time at work.
Yeah.
And especially as an entrepreneur,
Yes.
than you do at home, the wife, the kids, the whatever your pursuits are.
Has to be something you enjoy.
So the ranch, we're thinking about hay, we're thinking about cattle,
Right.
getting into that space.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been fun. I think we talked early on about, we touch a lot of things that don't really completely get to do something. Walking around, fixing pipe, cleaning out ditches, repairing fence, cutting wood, chopping wood. Those are things that have been kind of nice. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think that's probably maybe a second takeaway for young entrepreneurs is especially in this digital world, you have to find something, you have to find a tangible connection to the real world.
It's therapeutic.
Yes.
It really does. It helps you. Plus it helps you, your health.
Sure.
Physically, mentally, huge. I think it's important. Yeah.
Yeah, because as entrepreneurs, we're only dealing with the problems, right? Especially
Generally, yeah.
the more you move up into management, it's either a big opportunity or a big problem, and either way, the stress is there.
They're all stressful.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Dave, this has just been a fascinating conversation. I've always enjoyed sitting down with you, hearing your story,
Likewise.
and just watching that, especially over the past several years, just some amazing opportunities and changes for your business. And we're excited to watch as the next chapters unfold.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining the Missing Half podcast, where we're discovering what's missing in manufacturing and B2B marketing. Like, share, subscribe. Have a great day.